So good afternoon. I am Anto Budiarjo. This is Monday Live, something we do every Monday afternoon at 3 p.m. We're here to try and figure out where we're going with regards to smart buildings and all the technologies and issues related to that. So a reminder, the panelists' profiles are listed on mondaylive.org. Head over there if you wonder who we are. Important note is that views expressed here are personal, not of any company or organization. So keep that in mind. And please do post questions and Q&A on the chat, on the Zoom chat. And we hope to have a very interactive session today. And this deck is on mondaylive.org if you want any of the links on it. So this being May, this being the 2nd of May, the very first show of May, we're going to have a little bit of fun this month. We're going to play Family Feud, and we'll explain how that's going to work in a bit. So agenda, we'll have our normal chit chat and then get into Family Feud and see where it goes. But before we do any of that, I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Sinclair. What's going on?
Okay, well, we've got our May issue online, got online on the 30th and been online for a few days now. The theme is enabling value by improving infrastructure. It's kind of a bit of a roll-up of what Monday Live was chatting about all of April. Some good stuff there. What I learned about that is just the power of context. I think the last line there, we need to change our focus and engage in the creation of context of the communication of our change. It's not just about talking about what it is we're doing to change. We have to fit it into the context so people can understand how we bring embodied value to projects, because that's ultimately what drives the economics of our industry. In our May articles, we've got some great articles. One from Mark, Answer the Why in the Value-Driven Age. We've also got both Mark and Anto talked about what they've been doing in 25-25 and about interoperative. And an interesting twist from Scott Cochran as a result of what he did in Vegas and at the summit, which was in Charlotte. He sees the necessity for a new profession of professional services for buildings, and it's something that probably everybody on this screen and listening to this podcast needs to understand better. I actually very much concur with his thoughts there. It is getting complicated, and it is as we have electrical engineers, we have mechanical engineers, we need to have basically the smarter building engineers, and what we call those probably still needs to evolve, but there certainly is a necessity for that. Nicholas, these folks are all contributing editors. Nicholas also takes a run at it, and he talks about how we can create value together and how we have to kind of move forward rather than looking at what we've done. We've got to look at what we're about to do. And again, he points out that our biggest problem is communication. Back to you, Anto.
Okay, thank you, Ken. And John.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, two interesting stories, I thought. One from about a week ago, MasterCard tied compensation for all employees to their ESG goals in the company. So I thought that was pretty interesting. We see more and more of, I would call it, Fortune 100s, top tier companies, really getting vocal about ESG and developing plans. The other side, LEED certification, gaining more importance. I thought that was interesting over the years. I think we've heard, different things about LEED, and this story here, tenants and investors are more and more interested in seeing that the buildings that they're looking at or planning to rent in are LEED rated. So more visible trends towards a more efficient, sustainable future in the buildings market, and we'll see how that plays out.
So John, question. So the MasterCard. Now I've also noticed that Wendy's has come up with a similar program and a few other companies do, I guess Monday Live Group. Do we think this is going to be a beginning of a trend where companies are tying compensation into ESG goals and initiatives?
I think that part's true. The question is, how does it affect the industry's products and things that we're interested in, right? Running the buildings more efficiently, right? And I think we've commented over the last couple of weeks that we see some things that are supportive of ESG initiatives, but aren't going to at all touch how efficient the buildings run, right? And I think that's, to me, is a great unanswered question, because we know that the types of things that need to be done to buildings, they're not easy button things in most cases, right?
Right.
So,
And I know, just to extend real quick, is that the EU has come out, I think it was yesterday or Friday, or maybe over the weekend, that they've got a draft of ESG standards floating around that they're asking for comments and stuff. So again, how long before North America has standards as well, draft standards and so forth and so on? And I thought that was interesting that they've taken the lead yet again in trying to put out some standards there, some guidelines.
Yeah, and even here in the US, you've got other verticals. So this whole idea of energy and cybersecurity, add cyber to the list for ESG, it touches a number of points for all of us here. I mentioned on an earlier call, we're seeing contracts being won and lost based on ESG rankings in the oil and gas midstream kind of world. So it's a thing. It's important to your average, believe it or not, your average systems integrator in that vertical is having to pay attention to ESG, which is, these are grimy, dirty West Texas integrators, and they're thinking about those three letters. Kind of interesting.
Okay, thank you. I had two things. The first on the left is the world's first airport for flying cars. So it's kind of like a mini airport. Reason I put this up is that we've been talking on Monday Live on and off about really sort of the reconfiguration of cities. We talked about reuse of commercial buildings and all those kinds of things. And this obviously plays into that in terms of how transport over the next few decades. And this company has been working for, I guess, a few years to create this concept of an urban airport. And they built this one initially in Coventry in the UK, and then it's actually a movable airport. This version of it, because there's really a demonstration. They're going to move it around the country to show people, the concept and how it could work. So I thought that was interesting.
I thought the Jetsons' promise was that I could have just a dock next to my carport and just take off. Do I have to go somewhere to fly a car?
I think you have to wait 50 years for the home version of it.
This looks kind of cool. It looks like you pull up and somebody would come up on roller skates and give you a root beer float.
Well, I hope it's a hoverboard, not roller skates.
There you go. And the other thing, obviously, some of the in some parts of the world, the case number, COVID case numbers are increasing. New York being one of them. I was there last weekend, so I hope I'm all right. But just starting to see this pop up on various sort of news papers and other outlets. Sort of need to keep track of this. Any other thoughts from anybody else?
Steve Jones has popped something not interesting there on facility management advisor. That's kind of interesting.
Can you speak to it?
Click on it's looks like it's considerations for the whole, how do you return to the building? How do you return them? How do you get people returning to your offices, and what are the considerations you want to start thinking about. And they've got this factor called R0, first biosafety technology company dedicated to making the spaces we inhabit safer and clinically clean. Okay.
On returning to offices, I read an article this morning. I didn't grab it for our discussion, but one of the major driving factors of people who don't want to go back to the office have nothing to do with COVID. It has to do with commuting.
Mm.
Don't want to get in the car for an hour and a half.
Therefore, flying cars come into that, maybe.
Yeah.
We need to get Elon onto it.
There you go.
All right, so let us move on. So we are going to play Family Feud, and the way this is going to work is I'm going to pop up a poll that you should all see. The attendees. I don't think the panelists see the poll, unfortunately.
We see the poll, but we can't vote.
Yeah, we see the results of the poll. So what we want to do on this and other shows in May is we want to pick a pair of topics that are sort of close to each other, that are kind of not one or the other, but kind of two ways of thinking and looking about things related to smart buildings. And what we want to do is to get your input in terms of which ones we want to do first and second. If you could sort of take maybe 3 of the topics that's shown there on the poll, then we can get a sort of a broader distribution, and then we can start to see what kind of topics that we're going to be talking about. And while you're doing that, the colors that you see John and Anno Scholten on, the blue and the yellow, is how we're going to tell the different teams of the Family Feud game we're going to have to play.
You want them to pick the most interesting to them? They want to pick their top
Yes.
3 most interesting?
Yes, if
Okay.
you could do that.
And we encourage you to jump in, put in the chat as we're going through this Family Feud. We want to hear y'all's thoughts as well.
And
You
can they
mean
propose?
future stuff.
Hold on. Yeah,
Sorry.
can they also propose additional topics?
Yeah,
Okay,
if
for
we can
Arno,
do, if you have some thoughts about topics that we can pick up on the next show or one of the other shows, please just chime in on chat on that. So we won't be able to do that today. Give it a few more seconds. Come on, a few more.
Actually,
Right now we have a tie, so we can't go.
Oh no. Well, we could decide the tie.
We can.
So basically you're saying, Anno, that we've got the power for the tiebreaker, right?
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay. All right. So let's close the poll. And so we have the 2 top voters is integration versus interoperation, or open versus proprietary. So which one do we want to go?
I prefer integration versus interoperation. Be my vote.
Okay.
All right, so Anto, I'm going to suggest this, since interoperation, I know, is a favorite of yours, so that you can participate. How about I will do the moderator for this particular one, and so that you can chime in on whatever side you choose to go on.
Okay.
Do that?
Let's do that. So
Okay.
integration, if you're into integration, go blue, and if you're into interoperation, go yellow. So I'm going to go yellow. No, everybody's going to go yellow, which is a problem.
Oh, come on.
Nobody wants to be on a losing team here.
Come on, weenies. Let's go. Come on.
So you
Okay.
can assign us if you want, Anto.
Okay, so I think the rest of Ken, Bill, Gina, and any of you have any preference? What? Okay, one. Okay, tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to go for integration. I'm going to.
Okay.
Either
right.
way,
Argue against myself.
All right, and
There you go.
how about Jim Lee? I don't see a color on yours.
Jim is
but-
on phone only, so.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, so Jim, your integration. Welcome to Anno's team and Bill.
Woohoo.
All right. So
All right, thanks.
you're welcome. You're welcome. So, all right. So let's get started. I think, and again, we're doing this trial and error today, and other than the topics, and thank you everyone for the topics. So let's start with first question here to just get this everybody talking and agreeing, disagreeing, and whatever. So what is the difference between integration and interoperation? How about we start with John Petsy?
Sure, Mark. So my view is this, that the integration means there's a lift needed to accomplish the end goal. I am going to brute force integrate. I have some amount of information that will allow me to connect to that external system. I think the world that we're trying to get to is one of interoperation, which is if there's a system there, I can get the data from it. And that's only the delivering side. I think we have to look at the other side. Are the new software products being brought to market able to take data in? Right? We all kind of lean towards, oh, that system's closed, they won't give us the data. But there's a significant problem in a lot of these new apps aren't designed to take data in from anybody else, right? So it creates the problem on the other side. So that's my view of the difference.
All right, Anto.
Yeah, I was going to suggest, I'm just looking at the imbalance that we have here. We have too many blues. I think somebody needs
You
to-
got one
It's-
extra.
It still won't help you. You're going to lose.
That's right. That's right. So
Yeah,
Okay.
you're right. You're going to lose.
let's not
anyway,
worry
it
about the
doesn't matter.
imbalance. It's the
Okay, all right,
power
so-
of the speak.
so-
Go ahead. Go
So
ahead, Anto.
integration, and John is right in a way. Integration, to integrate is a verb, right? You have to do something. That's the way I always think about it, right? Somebody has to do something. That's why we have system integrators that actually does that. And that's the sort of, that's how it is. The downside of it, somebody has to do something, and especially in large buildings and large complex systems, that's actually a lot of things. So that's actually the downside of it. The plus side of integration is that integration can be specified, because you know exactly, or you should know exactly what you're going to end up with, because you can actually say all of the attributes of the system that you actually want to integrate and the results that you want to integrate at the end of the day. So a system in a building, whether it's a lighting system or an HVAC system, you actually want to behave in a specific way. So you specify it, and you know exactly what you're going to end up at the end of the day, and a whole bunch of people actually make it all work in accordance to that specification. Where interoperation is loosely coupled, meaning you may not actually know exactly in the whole how everything's going to fit together, but when something comes along, when something is installed, the way John was saying, that something should be able to find information and applications that it can actually use, so that it can actually work. So that to me is the difference between the two.
I'll just add on top of that, Anto. I actually would have picked blue, because as a quasi non-expert here, I just can bring my old age and wisdom and say, the harsh reality is blue is where we are. We love to be yellow. We'd love to be interoperable, but folks, we got to make integration work, and we got to make integration become interoperable. So we'd all love to be in the Jetsons where it's all one flat network, and we ain't there. So I'm all for integration and not resisting the fact that we have disparate systems and protocols out there.
Good point.
I think-
Go ahead, Anno.
I was going to say, my problem with integration, and in the context of what Bill just described, is it's naturally stifles innovation, because the problem I always have with integration is always comes to a least common denominator, because you've got so many people trying to talk about, okay, if we're going to integrate, look what happened to BACnet. It took 12 plus years to get to the first version where we actually started to integrate over BACnet protocols. And at the end of the day, you'd argue that what we ended up with was you know, the least common denominator of all that stuff. It stifles, by default, it stifles innovation. I like the concept of interoperation because, you know, you get to move to the applications and the things, the value that you're creating. To me, interoperation creates value. Integration is the plumbing to help you get there.
It creates work. It's hard to argue your logic, I know, for sure. All right. I'm
Yeah.
just say a little related to reality, but I hear you, brother.
So,
Gina, weigh in here.
Okay, so I'm gonna take this to a simplified level, and I'm gonna say that when I think about integration, that can be anything from equipment, system, or data. And that is the ability to have access to that data in a meaningful way, to be able to integrate it if you need to, if you want to. It's being able to bring it from one point to another point. And that's a very simplistic view. The second thing, when you talk about interoperability, okay, that is, to me, those devices or systems or those data points acting in concert with one another to deliver a single result. For instance, I use access control or occupancy sensors to determine what my set point is in a particular room. To me, that's interoperability. And so to me, interoperability is a function of integration. It is an outcome, or it is an outcome of integration. It is, if that makes any sense. So that's kind of how I see it. I might have a different take on that, but integration is just the ability to bring that into one system. The interoperability is what you do with it next. So it's a subset, or it is another component of integration.
Which is what Brian Turner just said on chat too, by the way.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that makes.
Oh, I wonder why. Anyway,
that makes sense. That
yeah.
makes sense.
So let's make sure we get everybody to have their first round at this. Jim Lee.
So I would say that interoperability is a common language, just to boil it down, and integration requires translation. So it's the difference between having a common language and something that requires translation at every step.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right, good one.
Okay,
Mr. Sinclair.
My observation on this is it's a complex topic and they are definitely very interweaved. But just imagine a chiller manufacturer trying to make sense of what it is we're talking about here. He needs to really do both of them. He needs to have it interoperate, and he needs to have it do a proper interface. It's not a simple task, but I do think they are both very closely related, and one is a subset of the other. I concur.
So let me ask this to, go ahead, Anna, go ahead. I got a question on this. Go ahead.
The challenge I have with the blue side talking about you have to do integration to get interoperability, it stems back to my lack of innovation. If the outcome is to get value and interoperability, is it we want to do integration because that's how we've always thought about it, right? Because most of us have been here forever, and that's how we've always tried to do. Why don't we challenge ourselves and go, if I want the interoperability, is there a better way to do it rather than coming up with integration type capabilities? In my case studies, the IoT guys, just to throw them up again, the advantage of the IoT guys, admittedly, is that they're using later technologies. APIs and REST interfaces these days are ubiquitous. They're well documented. The process of documenting them is easy. I don't really need to have quote unquote standards per se on the metadata, because it's pretty easy for me to, I can go ask, if I'm doing an Arduino project, I can go ask Google and get 1,000 answers to my question immediately, right? So, they've solved the interoperability because they use newer technologies. I think part of our challenge is we still have to deal with a lot of incumbent stuff that's out there that needs the translation that Jim just talked about. But anyway, hang on, John.
I was going to say a couple comments here. Steve Jones, integration can be as simply as a data import of a spreadsheet. Interoperability requires the full functionality of both systems being able being available, sorry, in from end to end. And then Brian just commented, APIs require integration, no standardization in how to make the API, how to organize it, how to secure it. Good comments. Now, let me ask you guys this to continue this conversation on integration versus interoperability or interoperation. From the building owner and operator's perspective, do you think they know the difference between the two? And is it our responsibility as leaders in the industry to educate them on the difference?
Can I?
Anto.
Yeah. Ultimately, I don't think the users, the operators, care or should know in most cases, with the exception that if their job or their role require change and changes, because interoperation it would provide that mechanism, because it's easier to change things, but integration is more stable. Once you actually have a system that's integrated, it actually makes it difficult for other systems to connect to it or to do something with the data from that integrated system, unless it was designed to be to interoperate with other systems from the very beginning.
I wanted to throw a comment in. It caused me to change my background to blue.
Traitor.
Yeah, I didn't know that was a rule. Is that a rule? We could do that?
Yeah.
I want to argue with Arno. So the new IoT guys having access to new technology, making it easier. MQTT. Oh, we publish an MQTT. It doesn't have any defined payload. They can publish any way they want. It doesn't make it interoperable. It makes it integratable. And I bring it up because what we've seen clients thinking they know what MQTT will get them, which is, oh, it's just going to connect, and being stunned, shocked, surprised, and not happy when they find out, no, there's integration required. And this goes to that earlier point I made is, a lot of these new things, whether it's product or software, have they done the work to actually make their stuff interoperable? And I would say to a large degree, more of them come down on the no side than the yes side. They're integratable. They're integratable. And Brian Turner's comment around APIs, right? And we've talked about it. APIs are the new proprietary protocols. They're just published.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to suggest, so John, I'm so with you. These companies coming out of Silicon Valley and whatever only care about their own little ecosystem. They could give a crap about anybody standing next to them.
That's
so
right.
They don't care about interoperation.
Correct.
Right.
So
but they say yes to integration, I'm
going to challenge that one. Challenge that. I think there are two aspects to what you said, two versions of that view, what you said there, Bill. So the people that we know of that we deal with in Silicon Valley, when you deal with the engineering people, today, all their software and all their things have APIs built in, that their capabilities exist. It's not that they don't exist. To do an API, and if you're building a product today, any engineer who's building a product will put an API just because it doesn't cost you anything to do so. Might not be wonderful, it might not be really, well, you don't even have to worry about the documentation anymore, because there are tool sets that will document your API for you fully automatically, as ugly as it is, but it'll document it for you. On the other side, which I agree with you, is on the business side, those organizations will hide or obfuscate or say, that's only for special people or special situations. So I think they control access to it. I don't think that they don't exist. I think they always exist. It's just the control and access to it.
I got that loud and clear. The question is, why do they even put an API? I try not to be cynical, but they put an API in because they feel like they have to. Like, oh yeah, because they don't have our valuations and all that.
It's what you do, right? Yeah, everybody. I'm building something. I'm going to put an API.
It's your nod to be able to have your system be integrated with other.
Right. So let me ask you guys a question here. Interoperation and interoperability. Are you using them interchangeable or do you define them differently?
I have an
That's a good
answer, but I have to
question.
change colors.
And because Matt has posted, where is the definition of interoperability coming from? So.
And David's got a link to it on Wikipedia for you.
Yeah, that's cool. Interoperability is the state of the systems and the equipment and the devices. They are they are able to be interoperable, and interoperable is how they work together. Is that right? Did I get that right or wrong? Something is, or did I get that wrong?
Well, if you read the Wikipedia, and it is Wikipedia, so give it that fact, right? I can go and edit this and change it before you even see it. But anyway, they talk about interoperability just being able to exchange information between products, which you could argue that it's integration, which is, yeah, at the end of the day, it's a bit of a sad state of affairs if we can't agree on the damn terms.
But I actually think we're all saying kind of the same things. It's kind of crazy. Look, the reality is right now, you got to integrate stuff. Oh, and if you're a pretty good systems integrator, it becomes interoperable. Your arguments, Anno, are logically sound, dude. It'd be great if the whole world spoke the same language, but they don't. So we're I think we're dancing around the same area. I'm not sure if it's an argument that has any, I mean, right now.
I think there's examples of both. Like, let's talk about like BACnet and KNX. If people follow the specs, their products are directly interoperable without integration work. The problem is the system they're contained in, I want to connect to another enterprise system. That's not interoperable out of the box. You have to do integration. But there are lots of examples of interoperable products ready to go. I think the thing we're seeing is at the system of systems level is where almost nothing is interoperable, but most things are integratable.
Well, to give you, let's do a different domain exercise. You know, I got one of these. I put every damn smart device in my house, and if you were here in Texas over the last couple of days, we actually had some peak events, which blows everybody's mind at the moment. But anyway, and you know, so I got everything that's interoperable, and you know, I've got it on my iPhone, so it talks with all the different stupid platforms that I've got. But I've got 1,000 apps to set them all up and configure them and make them talk to, you know, they talk to each other. Yeah, kind of, sort of, and Google and Alexa and whatnot. It's not easy, you know. When my house, when the power did flicker and everything kind of went catawampus, my wife threw up her hands and said, "Turn everything off, go back to switches." You know.
So is that integration? Are you trying? Are the vendors expecting you to integrate, or does it interoperate?
So that was my point. So I'm looking at it from an interoperability. I want to tell Google to turn on my kitchen lights and turn off the TV, and from my perspective, that's interoperability, right? I'm telling Google to tell my lights to do something. How all that's done underneath, you know, and all the way that they made all that work from an integration, and is a bit of a so what to me. But that's what I want. My focus wasn't, can I get, you know, this talk to that and what's the protocols and stuff. No, I just want to be able to tell Google, turn off my lights.
Right.
How about Jim Lee? You've been kind of quiet in the background.
I want to completely support what John Petsy said. I think that if you look at the track record of interoperability and BACnet over a long period of time, we've brought a lot of work over 30 years, vast interoperability. I agree completely that it did not handle the systems to systems area. And that's largely because the people driving it didn't have the imagination to think that far, unfortunately. However, we have gotten to the point where we can integrate almost all HVAC controls, lighting controls, fire alarms, to some extent, access control and camera, but less than I would like. So, I mean, we've got an enormous base there. And with the addition of Haystack and other metadata standards, we really have a vast base for building that interoperability that we've been working on for 30 years. What I find surprising is how few people actually know that or know that part of the story. And ultimately, I think that there is plenty of room for more interoperability, especially at the systems to systems level. But as I've said many times, one really needs to understand the problem that you're trying to solve. So what are the use cases at the highest level to build that interoperability around? And I'm not going to say that there isn't a time in the future for expansive capability of that, but you really need to start with what is it that you want to do? How do things want to talk? And I would make the argument that we've come a vast distance. We're not at the outset at all. We've been at this for 30 years.
So let me ask you guys this. I'm looking at the clock. We got about 20 minutes left. Do we want to just go ahead and call it a day and continue our conversation on this, since it seems to be going well, and do open versus proprietary next week? I think we should, and because there's a lot of chat coming in. So if you guys are okay as your host, I'm going to say that's what we're going to do. So a couple things here, just again, from Sir Brian Turner. How do programmable devices fit into an interoperable world without integration? Let me just finish reading these comments first. From Amy, could it be argued that LAN tried to do both? Good question there. From Matt, integration is done because interoperability is not inherent to most systems. I would agree with that.
That's a great point.
From Sir Brian Turner, Google in the integration platform in that case, and I think he was talking to Anno, referring to your recent talk there. And then you had to add it to the Google platform when you installed it. From Matt, can't have a world without integration unless time travel becomes possible. Love that comment, Matt. And anyway, so, all right. Who wants to talk? Somebody.
Can I just make a comment on
Sure.
language again? I was listening to Jim Lee describe BACnet as being interoperable, which is great, and we all know it is. But when he then went on to say that has made it possible to integrate all of the BACnet stuff, right? So he's actually using both words in.
But I would
Bad choice of words.
Yeah, but I don't know what word you would have used then. That's kind of my point, is that
right.
And that's where interoperation kind of comes in there, but it's not quite the same thing. Just an observation.
So if we were all from IT companies, would our definitions of these things change, or would we even be having this conversation?
That's a good question. And I was thinking about that. Let's think about it from a context of email, right? I mean, email, I can use whatever email client I want, whether I use Google, Outlook, whatever, whatever my favorite application. And that application, let's say I use Outlook, and Outlook can also integrate, bring in the data from my tasks and memos and a whole bunch of other crap. I think from an IT's perspective, the interoperability, it's actually a really good question. Is interoperability, it's not that my Outlook is going to talk to your Google Mail, right, Gina? That it doesn't. My Outlook is not going to talk to your Google Mail directly. My Outlook is going to talk to some email server that's going to deal with what's called the translation question that I think Jim brought up earlier, that eventually gets to your Google client for you to be able to read my email.
Yeah, ultimately,
it's not the text, it's all the other crap that's around it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is the key point, is that whenever you're dealing with IT, the context is automatically assumed, because so much more of the context around what we do with everyday IT has to do with text and numbers and pictures. Whereas when we're dealing with OT networks, we're dealing with control systems, physical world analytics, basically where the components themselves, the context is different than the context that flows through everything that IT typically deals with.
I want to add one more dimension to that, Jim. Sorry, Quick,
Just
quickly.
Matt just posted this related to what Jim just said. In the IT world, it's protocols and file formats. Do you guys
Right.
agree with that?
Yes, because I think it extends what I just wanted to say too, to Jim's point, is that one of the other things that we deal a lot with, of course, now is time series data. And people keep forgetting that piece, right? There's a lot of stuff that we do that's centric on time series, which is not really in, it's, you know, to Matt's point, it's in, there's protocols and file formats, but file formats are documents, right? It's a document that gets sent and that's it. And Bill's gone, yeah, blue and yellow. Okay.
Trader.
It gets sent, whereas, you know, the time series aspect of the data that we deal with, and, you know, John and anyone who does fault detection knows this really, really well. It adds a whole different dimension to the type of data and the interoperability of that data.
I would argue that IT deals with both. If you think about things like file formats and network and how you install network traffics and things like that, those are all interoperable things, right? Because you can plug in any printer into the IT network and it will just interoperate. But when you start to think about how does the HR department work with the accounting department, or, you know, at the higher levels of the architecture, then they are not interoperable in a similar way that it is with us. At the system level, they're not. So that I would actually say that they're in a similar situation as we are.
So if you had, I was going to say, if you had both, or you were striving for both, and again, kind of playing the middle of the road here for me, is what comes first, integration or interoperability?
So let's go back to the IT example, just because I think sometimes we do ourselves a disservice, and like
Ken Sinclair's laughing, sorry.
Like Jim was saying earlier about, you know, we're on a journey of 30 years, but just think about in the IT world, the PDF document. I mean, there was a long stretch of time, and only quite recently, that the best you can do with a PDF document in any application is show it. You know, it's only been in the very recent past that you could actually cut and paste and select and mark up and do things with the PDF, right? It was a pretty crude document format that you could send around, and I can read it in an attachment in an email, but I couldn't do much with it. It's only just recently that I can actually start doing a lot more interesting things with PDF documents, and that's taken them more than 30 years to get to that point as well. So sometimes we do ourselves a little bit of disservice, Jim, I think, in saying that, you know, they're way ahead of us. Sometimes they're not.
So,
Agreed.
so if you look at the interesting thing, I think, is when you look at IT and you look at years ago when they did voice, video, and data, or voice over IP. And that was taking an old PBX system and converting that into an IP-based system to give you voice over IP. They didn't call it integration, and they didn't call it interoperability. What they called that was convergence. And so now you have voice, video, and data, and that's converged on the same network. Is there some similarities to what occurred then in IT with that to what we're talking here?
That
So,
feels to me as to be a different thing altogether. It's kind of,
well, to me, I think we're talking a little bit about convergence. I mean, when you're talking about interoperability or converging, and so I bring that around because, you know, back in the day, the old PBX systems, those were, if you guys remember what they look like, and then to be able to convert them over or make them integrate or interoperable in a IP environment was a big and a heavy lift. And so today, when you look at a lot of companies, I mean, I doubt there's many companies out there that have PBX in the basement. You know, they're all voice, video, and data. So my question is, are we talking about convergence as far as interoperability? The ability to converge multiple data sets from different systems and different pieces of equipment.
I think that talks back to the endpoint thing, which is where I was coming from too, Gina, is that I don't, you know, you said earlier the example that, you know, you had the data coming from access control system to be able to do occupancy to control my CO2,
Right.
you know, in my HVAC system. I mean, that's a true example of, to me, that's a true example of interoperability, right? I'm using information to do something of value in another system per se. But when we get to things like analytics, I don't need systems to talk to systems to do what I need to do in an analytics context, right? I have no need for the access control system to talk to the building automation system to do my analytics. All I need is the data from each of those, and I'll do the, you know, whatever translation into a format to do that. So in that case, I'm doing interoperability, but I'm not really integrating the things. I'm not asking them to talk to each other.
See, I look at analytics as integration.
And I don't. I see it as it's not an integration, it's an aggregation question. It's like.
So
Ken Sinclair, go ahead, Anto. Go ahead.
I was thinking of what comes first, and I was thinking of BACnet. And before BACnet, back in the 80s and 90s, I guess, there were RS-232, RS-485s, and all of these sort of funky protocols, and ArcNet and whatever. And the only way you can make them devices talk to each other is to integrate them. And BACnet came along. It took a long time. I know Jim knows that very well. And now everything's interoperable. So to me, it's a progression from integration to interoperation is the natural flow of things.
Ken.
It's almost like Anto, you would naturally be blue here. Even though you selected blue, you're almost talking yourself into blue. I'm wondering if we're being pedantic.
So look at you, you're blue and yellow. I mean, you're split right down the middle, aren't you?
Yeah, well, like Matt said, it's chicken and egg. Is it really? I wonder if it's an argument worth having. I mean, the topics you put out earlier, open and not open, all that, those are clearly binary, awesome choices. This is almost chicken and egg. Is it really an argument?
That's what we asked. Ken Sinclair, weigh in. You've been kind of quiet.
Okay, I was
there.
just off reading automated buildings while you guys were talking. And I was reading Brian Frank's article on the independent data layer. And
Andy Frank.
somehow that kind of that's been generating quite a bit of interest on LinkedIn and about, and it kind of pulls at both of those and sort of says maybe this should all just be in a common database, which I think we all have different opinions about as well. So I'll just throw that in the mix. I don't often create value, I just cause confusion.
So
if you're putting it into a one database, you're integrating the data, I guess. I don't know.
One would think you would be.
You know, Steve Fay is there. That he may want to chime in here. He's not.
Oh, did he join in?
Yeah.
All right. Can you guys hear me?
We
Yes.
can. First of all,
Right.
what side are you on, Steve? Integration or interoperation?
Black is not a color.
I'm on the interoperation side.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So my 2 or 3 cents here is, to me, interoperability has to do with the user experience, not about the data per se. It's about how can I get access to the data in a consistent way. So let's take an example. All the different systems have defined users, but each system, whether it's a building automation, a fire system, an access control system, etc., defines those users in unique ways. In the IT world, you can set up user accounts for any kind of software package, generally speaking, through Active Directory or LDAP or equivalent, right? In our world, we still don't have that luxury, and that's an example of what I mean by the user experience. So I would like to be able to set up my users, irrespective of the kind of automation system it is, with one user interface, and I can do it across any and all systems. that to me is a great example of interoperability.
So I'm
What do you guys
going to take challenge at you, Steve. So and I think someone said it here earlier too. I think you can do that today. The question is, what's the lift to do it, right?
Yes.
What's the amount of work and effort to do it? I could tell you that I could, with a right number of people, build a single pane of glass that integrates everything in every system we've ever looked at and make it work. I think the real argument is, how easy is that? Is that something I can do, or do I need a team of 50 engineers, or is that something?
And Anna, what I'm saying is, to me, it shouldn't be any work. If all manufacturers supported the same mechanisms, in this case, say Active Directory as an example, then there wouldn't be any work, because you'd only learn the one way to set up and manage users, and every system below it would work automatically out of the box, i.e. plug and play.
Steve, we are working on that with BACnet authorization and authentication for BACnet security. So hopefully we will see that standard.
Great. So again, if that happens, Jim, we've solved it in theory for any BACnet-based BAS system. But if a fire system or an access or a lighting control from Lutron doesn't happen to support BACnet, you still have the problem.
True.
And now you're back in this world of having to custom engineer a way to do it. And so when I advocate for interoperability, I'm looking for these user experiences. Another one would be alarms. I want to be able to gather without any real work. I want to subscribe to your alarms, send them over. I don't want to have to create a secondary set of alarm tests. I simply want the alarms to come into my alarm console because I asked for them. So that's, to me, the difference between integration and interoperability or interoperative, is that it's designed around the user experience, less so than it is around controller to controller or system to system to share data and take some action.
So does that echo what Gina just posted? Is a smartphone integrated or interoperable? I mean, to me, a smartphone is both integrated and interoperable.
Can you explain that? Which parts are integrated and which parts are interoperable?
I don't know. I'm the moderator, so I'm pleading the fifth on this one. This is up to you guys.
All the phones, your smartphone apps, where they need it, all know how to take GPS tracking and build it into their apps. Right? But from an interoperability standpoint, you go into your Apple account or your Google account, you download the app, and loads right up into your phone, and you can start using it. So they interoperate seamlessly on your phone.
But again, back to my point though, Steve, we know that's taken a team of thousands of Apple and Google engineers to get to that point. That was not a trivial exercise, right?
Oh,
and not thousands, it was probably tens of thousands.
I agree. And my point on it is that our industry's got a lot of work to do to mirror that kind of capability. But if it's done at the supplier level as opposed to at the integrator level in the field, it's gonna ultimately make everybody's job a lot easier and a lot cheaper today.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think the difference again in the two industries, of course, is that, a Google or an Apple can wield the big stick about, well, this is how you're going to do it, because, 9 trillion people want to use it, right?
Yeah. But in a way, a smartphone has both, because each app is actually integrated, right? Because if you take any of the apps, it integrates all the different functions, so you have a good experience there. But the app then interoperates with other apps like GPS and like banking and other things that we talked about.
We can maybe take a little bit of a lead from the automotive industry here. They've been struggling with this too. If you take a look at what they're doing, they're trying to create their own GPS and their own map systems, and nobody uses that crap. They all either use Apple or So they've got millions of dollars of research trying to build these things, and in the final analysis, nobody uses it. They use the phone apps, and
Yeah,
so
you're
I think we
right.
have to learn how to interoperate with IT a lot better than we have.
So we've
Yeah,
got
so
roughly
Ken,
three.
Ken, that's my point about the user experience, right? Once a user gets comfortable with their phone for mapping, they don't want to use any other mapping application.
And we as an industry are user hostile. We
Oh, yeah,
make our
totally.
systems extremely painful.
And the other side of that, Steve, is that if you, for some odd reason, if you and everybody stops liking Google Maps, then everybody will stop and start to use a different map, and that transition is easy.
All right, let me jump in. We've got roughly about 3 minutes, 2.5 minutes. I'm gonna turn it back over to you, Anto. How about last comments from everybody, last 30 seconds or so. Let's start with Bill. How about you?
Check yourselves, make sure this is a conversation really worth having, or we're not being pedantic.
Anto.
I think you have to understand what it is that you're trying to do. If it's something that has to work a certain way predictively, that has to be an integration thing. But if you want to provide flexibility to those who use it, you really want interoperation.
John Petsy.
I think the issue here, I mean, I think we're drawing a fine point on some things. I think the real issue is how much effort's involved, right? And where's the threshold? We say, well, that's integration versus out of the box interoperability. Even you talk about, like Anna was, and Steve about, setting up users. There's 2 standards out there, LDAP, SAML. Go try and do it. If you're not deeply experienced with those technologies, you will feel like you're doing systems integration, even though they're interoperable out of the box. So it's how much lift. That's the question.
Steve Fay.
Yeah, well, so I agree. Obviously, I'm coming from the user perspective for interoperability, and if we can get on board with BACnet to show how it can work across multiple vendors, then I think we have a great example to lead the rest of the industry and all the other verticals.
Gina.
So I think equipment manufacturers should put all the smarts at the equipment level and a few Ethernet ports, and let's start there.
Jim Lee.
I think you got to understand the problem domain first and try to figure out the use cases for what you're trying to do. And then the choice of interoperability or integration become clear. And it is one of cost versus time. But I think that people tend to wander around as to what they consider open. Is it RS-232, RS-485? Is it Ethernet? Is it ArcNet? Is it an API? What really gives us that interoperability is the open language. BACnet has such a language. Haystack has metadata definitions. Starting with those 2 things, if we understand the use cases, we'll have a clear map of what's best to do.
So remember that what you just said on open, and I think that can be entered into our discussion when we do open and proprietary. I think Ken Sinclair, did I get you or did I forget you?
You forgot me.
All right, there you
But
go.
anyway, what I would like to point out is what I see here is an incredible opportunity for this group to provide wisdom, words, and maybe specifications and guidelines, because as we're talking, manufacturers are trying to figure out how they should provide interfaces to their heat pumps, their chillers, their every device. And the fact that we haven't got our crap together and we can't define these words as clear as we can is a problem. And I think we need to somehow, as an industry, we've got to develop some of those guidelines. And we got a great start here. It was a great discussion. Thanks.
And Anto, back to you to take us home.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Mark of your thoughts of this discussion as a moderator, because you've.
Well, first of all, I thoroughly enjoyed the comments. I love the interactivity. I did like the disagreement or different thoughts of opinions, which I think is healthy. And I hope that, again, to echo what Mr. Sinclair just said, is that we can start to have this as part of a ongoing conversation. Because if we're just sitting here bull crapping just us, and we don't take this and other topics that will be coming down the road and take them further, then we could have this discussion when we're at the old controls home in Florida, trying to
Get
sip
off
a
my
little
back, Nick.
liquor or something. And you remember that day? Yeah. So anyway.
By the way, I think Anno was a little edgy, Anno, for this family feud. So I'm just saying that. No, I'm kidding, babe.
Okay, so
this feud
let's
needs one new feature, and that's the ability of everyone to turn the other person's background brown.
all right. So this has been enormous fun. Thank you for the audience to participate in this, and thanks for everybody. Thanks for Mark for moderating. We'll get the video up by tomorrow-ish, and I guess next week we're going to be talking about open versus proprietary. So that should be fun as well. So look forward to it. Bye-bye. Have a great week.
Cheers.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
See you guys.